Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I am back with some more Esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Mrs. Helena Blavatsky. This is Isis Unveiled. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points that are brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but some people seem to find enjoyment in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box below, along with the original source material, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things I do. A particular note again today will almost certainly be the unconventional Bible study. With that being said, we are going to dive in and continue our exploration of Isis Unveiled with Part 2, Chapter 8, Part 2. The accusations against Masons have been mostly half guesswork, half unquenchable malice, and predetermined vilification. Nothing conclusive and certain of a criminal character has been directly proved against them. Even their abduction of Morgan has remained a matter of conjecture. The case was used at the time as a political convenience by huckstering politicians. When an unrecognizable corpse was found in Niagara River, one of the chiefs of this unscrupulous class, being informed that the identity was exceedingly questionable, unguardedly exposed the whole plot by saying, "Well, no matter, he's a good enough Morgan until after the election." On the other hand, we find the order of the Jesuits not only permitting, in certain cases, but actually teaching and inciting to high treason and regicide. A series of lectures upon Freemasonry and its dangers, as delivered in 1862 by James Burton Robertson, professor of modern history in the Dublin University, are lying before us. In them, the lecturer quotes profusely as his authorities the said Abbé Barruel, a natural enemy of the Masons, who cannot be caught at the confessional, and Robison, a well-known apostate Mason of 1798. As usual with every party, whether belonging to the Masonic or anti-Masonic side, the traitor from the opposing camp is welcomed with praise and encouragement, and great care is taken to whitewash him. However convenient for certain political reasons, the celebrated committee of the Anti-Masonic Convention of 1830, U.S. of America, may have found it to adopt this most Jesuitical proposition of Puffendorf, that oaths oblige not when they are absurd and impertinent, and that the other which teaches that an oath obliges not if God does not accept it. Yet no truly honest man would accept such sophistry. We sincerely believe that the better portion of humanity will ever bear in mind that there exists a moral code of honor, far more binding than an oath, whether on the Bible, Quran, or Veda. The Essenes never swore on anything at all, but their ayes and nays were as good and far better than an oath. Besides, it seems surpassingly strange to find nations that call themselves Christian instituting customs in civil and ecclesiastical courts diametrically opposed to the command of their God, see abortion, who distinctly forbids any swearing at all, neither by heaven nor by earth nor by the head. It seems to us to maintain that an oath obliges not if God does not accept it, besides being an absurdity, as no man living, whether he be fallible or infallible, can learn anything of God's secret thoughts, is anti-Christian in the full sense of the word. The argument is brought forward only because it is convenient and answers the object. Oaths will never be binding till each man will fully understand that humanity is the highest manifestation on earth of the unseen supreme deity. I don't necessarily believe that. And each man an incarnation of his God. All right. We have talked previously, and we will talk again, about the theory of spiritual evolution. We dwell in the fifth plane of existence. We are an individualized piece of God, but we are not gods, right? No one that you can ever put your eyes on is an incarnation of God. But we are all each a divine incarnation. equally, with no preference to any one particular individual. Each and every one of us is here expressly by the will of God, through the express force of God, right? The Holy Spirit is everything, and our temple is what we get to navigate 5D space in. But the thing that makes the decisions, your soul, the individualized piece of the divinity, which is you, right? That is eternal. It was somewhere prior to being here. It will be somewhere when it leaves here. But it does not make you God, right? There are things that are off limits to you. There is nothing that is off limits to God. All right. So we are not the highest manifestation on earth of the unseen supreme deity. I believe that there are at least two realms above ours, right? We are in the fifth plane, 5D. I believe that the elementals, so to speak, live on the sixth plane, and the angels and demons live on the seventh plane, which is higher planes of manifestation than us. Just because they don't have a corporeal body does not mean that they are not here. Right? If that is too much, let me know in the comments, and we will see about trying to get a better explanation of that. But they are around us. They're just in a different phase of existence. The dogs are in a different phase of existence. They're here. They just don't exist in the exact same plane that we do. And all of these planes are together. You just can't see in that particular frequency. You can't see that particular scope, right? So, each man is here divinely by the will of God, absolutely, fully. Without that, there is no one. There is no existence without the intention of God. But no one that you ever will see, can put your hands on, will ever be God. That is an important distinction, and one that I have to point out. It is one of the things I was told. So, back to the text. And when the sense of personal responsibility will be so developed in him that he will consider forswearing the greatest possible insult to himself as well as to humanity. No oath is now binding unless taken by one who, without any oath at all, would solemnly keep his simple promise of honor. Therefore, to bring forward as authority such men as Barrowell or Robeson is simply obtaining the public confidence under false pretenses. It is not the spirit of Masonic malice whose hot coin slanders like a mint, but far more that of the Catholic clergy and their champions. And a man who would reconcile the two ideas of honor and perjury in any case whatsoever is not to be trusted himself. That is truth. If they will lie in the small things, they will lie in the big things. Loud is the claim of the 19th century to preeminence in civilization over the ancients, and still more clamorous that of the churches and their sycophants that Christianity has redeemed the world from barbarism and idolatry. How little both are warranted, we have tried to prove in these 2 volumes. The light of Christianity has only served to show how much more hypocrisy and vice its teachings have begotten in the world since its advent, and how immensely superior were the ancients over us in every point of honor. The clergy, by teaching the helplessness of man, his utter dependence on providence, and the doctrine of atonement, have crushed in their faithful followers every atom of self-reliance and self-respect. So true is this, that it is becoming an axiom that the most honorable men are to be found among atheists and the so-called infidels. We hear from Hipparchus that in the days of the heathenism, the shame and disgrace that justly attended the violation of his oath threw the poor wretch in a fit of madness and despair, so that he cut his throat and perished by his own hands. And his memory was so abhorred after his death that his body lay upon the shore of the island of Samos, and had no other burial than the sands of the sea. But in our own century, we find 96 delegates to the United States Anti-Masonic Convention, every one doubtless a member of some Protestant church, and claiming the respect due to men of honor and gentlemen, offering the most Jesuitical arguments against the validity of the Masonic oath. The committee, pretending to quote the authority of the most distinguished guides in the philosophy of morals and claiming the most ample support of the inspired, who wrote before Freemasonry existed, resolved that, as an oath was a transaction between man on one part and the Almighty Judge on the other, and the Masons were all infidels and unfit for civil trust. Therefore, their oaths had to be considered illegal and not binding. We're going to touch on the Masons real quick because it has been a little while since we have done so. There are a whole lot of secret clubs out there. There's the Masons and the Illuminati, right? The Skull and Bones Association. There's a myriad of them. I'm not going to try and list them all off, but you know what I'm talking about. There's all kinds of little clubs. People ascribe to these clubs things that may or may not necessarily be true. Any one of them requiring blood is going to be automatically bad, so that's going to rule out some of the things that we know about some of the situations, such as Skull and Bones. The Masons, however, seem to be what they appear to be on paper. They are quite open about their proceedings. They are quite open about their membership requirements. They are quite open about everything inside of their secret society except the ceremonial magic that they participate in and do not understand. I live life by what I like to call the one mother father rule. What that means is that the entire organization does not have to be bad in order for there to be bad apples in it. There just needs to be that one guy. The one guy needs to be the guy that calls the shots, or the guy with the most influence. The Masons, for the most part, seem to be set up in a way that does not allow that. They get new leadership every single year. It is voted on by the law, the lodge, and you're not allowed to be consecutive, right? So you're not allowed to consolidate the power. You're not allowed to call the shots. That does not mean that there cannot be Masons within the club who are recruiting for outside of the club. They get these people and they test them and they see where their morals lie, because that is part of being a Mason, right? And if you're aligned correctly and you've got the right person, you'll be okay. But if you're aligned a little bit off of center and you get the right person, then you might be recruited for one of the other clubs. I do not attribute to the Masons most of what the malice that people do. It only takes the one guy. I use a computing company where it writes software, for instance. There only needs to be the one guy in charge. And he tells his person underneath him, hey, I need you to deliver this package. He doesn't know that there's a bomb in the package. He doesn't know that there's whatever in the package. He just knows that his boss told him to do this thing. So he does it and he gets paid, and he has no clue that he committed a nefarious act. Most of the transactions for these clubs are along those lines. Most of the people are not actively evil, but there are a few bad eggs located everywhere. Some of the bigger clubs probably have more recruiters. That's where I stand on the Masons. I do not see them as a necessarily bad club, but they do things that they don't believe in, and I find that foolish, right? They perform ceremonial magic, but they don't believe in ceremonial magic, and that is dumb. Back to the text. But we will return to these lectures of Robertson and his charges against Masonry. The greatest accusation brought against the latter is that Masons reject a personal God. This is on the authority of Barrowell and Robeson, and that they claim to be in possession of a secret to make men better and happier than Christ, his apostles, and his church have made them. I have that. That is what I am dispensing on this channel without any secret club being necessary. If you don't understand what I'm saying in that particular, fall back to the Bible study that I told you would be there. Were the latter accusation but half true, it might yet allow the consoling hope that they had really found that secret by breaking off entirely from the mythical Christ of the church and the official Jehovah. But both the accusations are simply as malicious as they are absurd and untrue, as we shall presently see. Let it not be imagined that we are influenced by personal feelings in any of our reflections upon Masonry. So far from this being the case, we unhesitatingly proclaim our highest respect for the original purposes of the order, and some of our most valued friends are within its membership. We say naught against Masonry, as it should be, but denounce it as, thanks to the intriguing clergy, both Protestant and Catholic and Protestant, it now begins to be. Professedly the most absolute of democracies, it is practically the appanage of aristocracy, wealth, and personal ambition. Professedly the teacher of true ethics, it is debased into a propaganda of anthropomorphic theology. The half-naked apprentice brought before the master during the initiation of the first degree is taught that at the door to every lodge, every social distinction is laid aside, and the poorest brother is the peer of every other, though a reigning sovereign or an imperial prince. In practice, the craft turns lickspittle in every monarchical country into any regal scion who may deign, for the sake of using it as a political tool, to put on the one symbolical lambskin. How far gone is the Masonic fraternity in this direction? We can judge from the words of one of its highest authorities, John Yarker, Jr., of England, past Grand Warden of the Grand Lodge of Greece, Grand Master of the Rite of Swedenborg, also Grand Master of the ancient and primitive Rite of Masonry, and heaven only knows what else. Says that Masonry could lose nothing by the adoption of a higher, not pecuniary, standards of membership and morality, with exclusion from the purple of all who inculcate frauds, sham historical degrees, and other immoral abuses. And again on page 157, as the Masonic fraternity is now governed, the craft is fast becoming the paradise of the bon vivant, of the charitable hypocrite, who forgets the version of St. Paul and decorates his breast with a charity jewel. Having by this judicious expenditure obtained the purple, he metes out judgment to other brethren of greater ability and morality, but less means. The manufacturer of paltry Masonic tinsel, the rascally merchant who swindles in hundreds or even thousands, by appealing to the tender consciences of those who do regard their OBs, and the Masonic emperors and other charlatans who make power or money out of the aristocratic pretensions which they have tacked on to our institution ad campantunum vulgus. We have no wish to make a pretense of exposing secrets long since hawked about the world by perjured Masons. Everything vital, whether in symbolical representations, rites, or passwords, as used in modern Freemasonry, is known in the Eastern fraternities, though there seems to be no intercourse or connection between them. If Medea is described by Ovid as having arm, breast, and knee made bare, left foot slipshod, and Virgil, speaking of Dido, shows this queen herself, now resolute on death, having one foot bare, etc., why doubt that there are in the East real patriarchs of the sacred Vedas, explaining the esotericism of pure Hindu theology and Brahmanism quite as thoroughly as European patriarchs? But if there are a few Masons who, from study of Kabbalistic and other rare works, and coming in personal communication with brothers from the faraway East, have learned something of esoteric Masonry, it is not the case with the hundreds of American lodges. While engaged in this chapter, we have received most unexpectedly, through the kindness of a friend, a copy of Mr. Yarker's volume, from which passages are quoted above. It is brimful of learning and, what is more, of knowledge, as it seems to us. It is especially valuable at this moment, since it corroborates in many particulars what we have said in this work. Thus, we read in it the following: We think we have sufficiently established the fact of the connection of Freemasonry with other speculative rites of antiquity, as well as the antiquity and purity of the old English Templar rite of 7 degrees, and the spurious derivation of many of the other rites therefrom. Such high Masons need not be told, though craftsmen in general do, that the time has come to remodel Masonry and restore those ancient landmarks borrowed from the early sodalities, which the 18th century founders of speculative Freemasonry meant to have incorporated in the fraternity. There are no longer any secrets left unpublished. The order is degenerating into a convenience for selfish men to use and bad men to debase. It is but recently that a majority of the supreme councils of the ancient and accepted rite assembled at Lausanne justly revolting against such a blasphemous belief as that in a personal deity, invested with all human attributes, pronounced the following words: Freemasonry proclaims, as it has proclaimed from its origin, the existence of a creative principle, under the name of the great architect of the universe. Against this, a small minority has protested, urging that belief in a creative principle is not the belief in God, which Freemasonry requires of every candidate before he can pass its very threshold. This confession does not sound like the rejection of a personal God. Could we have the slightest doubt upon the subject, it would be thoroughly dispelled by the words of General Albert Pike, perhaps the greatest authority of the day among American Masons, who raises himself most violently against this innovation. We cannot do better than to quote his words. This principe creator is no new phrase. It is but an old term revived. Our adversaries, numerous and formidable, will say, and will have the right to say, that our principe creator is identical with the principe genitor of the Indians and Egyptians, and may fitly be symbolized as it was symbolized anciently by the Lingai. To accept this in lieu of a personal God is to abandon Christianity and the worship of Jehovah, and to return to wallow in the styles of paganism. And are those of Jesuitism, then, so much cleaner? Our adversaries, numerous and formidable. That sentence says all. Who these so formidable enemies are, is useless to inquire. They are the Roman Catholics, and some of the Reformed Presbyterians. To read what the two factions respectively write, we may well ask which adversary is the more afraid of the other. But what shall it profit anyone to organize against a fraternity that does not even dare to have a belief of its own for fear of giving offense? And pray, how, if Masonic oaths mean anything, and Masonic penalties are regarded as more than burlesque, can any adversaries, numerous or few, feeble or strong, know what goes on inside the lodge, or penetrate beyond that brother terrible, or the Tyler who guards with a drawn sword the portals of the lodge? Is then this brother terrible no more formidable than Offenbach's General Bohm, with his smoking pistol, jingling spurs, and towering panache? Of what use the millions of men that make up the great fraternity the world over, if they cannot be so cemented together as to bid defiance to all adversaries? Can it be that the mystic tie is but a rope of sand, and masonry but a toy, to feed the vanity of a few leaders who rejoice in ribbons and regalia? Is its authority as false as its antiquity? It seems so indeed, and yet, as even the fleas have smaller fleas to bite 'em, there are Catholic alarmists, even here, who pretend to fear masonry. And yet, these same Catholics, in all the serenity of their traditional impudence, publicly threaten America with its 500,000 Masons and 34 million Protestants with a union of church and state under the direction of Rome. The danger which threatens the free institutions of this republic, we are told, will come from the principles of Protestantism logically developed. The present Secretary of the Navy, that is not untrue, right? Protestantism started me on the path where I am, right? If I was a Catholic, I wouldn't have read the Bible. I wouldn't have actually looked at it and done the things that we did in the Bible study to understand just how wrong that particular philosophy is. So Protestantism actually is the reason why I do what I do, even though I am definitely no longer a Protestant. The present Secretary of the Navy, the Honorable R.W. Thompson of Indiana, having actually dared in his own free Protestant country to publish a book recently on the papacy and the civil power, in which his language is as moderate as it is gentlemanly and fair. A Roman Catholic priest at Washington, D.C., the very seat of government, denounces him with violence. What is better, a representative member of the Society of Jesus, Father F.X. Winninger, D.D., pours upon his devoted head a vial of wrath that seemed to have been brought direct from the Vatican cellars. The assertions, he says, which Mr. Thompson makes on the necessary antagonism between the Catholic Church and free institutions are characterized by pitiful ignorance and blind audacity. He is reckless of logic, of history, of common sense, of charity, and presents himself before the loyal American people as a narrow-minded bigot. No scholar would venture to repeat the stale calumnies which have so often been refuted. In answer to his accusations against the Church as the enemy of liberty, I tell him that if ever this country should become a Catholic country, that is, if the Catholics should ever be in the majority and have control of the political power, then he would see the principles of our Constitution carried out to the fullest extent. He would see that these states would be in very deed united. He would behold a people living in peace and harmony, joined in the bonds of one faith, their hearts beating in unison with love for their fatherland, with charity and forbearance toward all, and respecting the right and consciences even of their slanderers. In behalf of this Society of Jesus, he advises Mr. Thompson to send his book to the Tsar, Alexander II, and to Frederick William, Emperor of Germany. He may expect from them, as a token of their sympathy, the orders of St. Andrew and the Black Eagle. From clear-minded, self-thinking, patriotic Americans, he cannot expect anything but the declaration of their contempt. As long as American hearts will beat in American bosoms and the blood of their fathers shall flow in their veins, such efforts as Thompson's shall not succeed. True, genuine Americans will protect the Catholic Church in this country and will finally join it. Negative, ghostwriter, the pattern is full. After that, having thus, as he seems to think, left the corpse of his impious antagonist upon the field, he marches off, emptying the dregs of his exhausted bottle after the following fashion. We leave the volume whose argument we have killed as a carcass to be devoured by those Texan buzzards, those stinking birds. We mean that kind of men who love to feed on corruption, calumnies, and lies, and are attracted by the stench of them. This last sentence is worthy to be added as an appendix to the Discorsi del Sommo Pontificio Pio IX, by Don Pasquale de Francisis, immortalized in the contempt of Mr. Gladstone, Del Maître del Valet. Moral: this will teach the fair-minded, sober, and gentlemanly writers that even so well-bred an antagonist as Mr. Thompson has shown himself in his book cannot hope to escape the only available weapon in the Catholic armory, Billingsgate. The whole argument of the author shows that while forcible, he intends to be fair, but he might as well have attacked with a Tertullianistic violence, for his treatment would not have been worse. It will, doubtless, afford him some consolations to be placed in the same category with schismatic and infidel kings, emperors and kings. While Americans, including Masons, are now warned to prepare themselves to join the Holy Apostolic and Roman Catholic Church, we are glad to know that there are some, as loyal and respected as any in Masonry, who support our views. Conspicuous among them is our venerable friend, Mr. Leon Heinemann, P.M., and a member of the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania. For 8 or 9 years he was editor of the Masonic Mirror and Keystone, and is an author of repute. He assures us personally that for over 30 years he has combated the design to erect into a Masonic dogma belief in a personal God. In his work, Ancient York and London Grand Lodges, he says, Masonry, instead of unfolding professionally with the intellectual advancement of scientific knowledge and general intelligence, has departed from the original aims of the fraternity, and is apparently inclining towards a sectarian society. That is plainly to be seen in the persistent determination not to expunge the sectarian innovations interpolated in the ritual. It would appear that the Masonic fraternity of this country are as indifferent to ancient landmarks and usages of Masonry as the Masons of the past century under the London Grand Lodge were. It was this conviction which prompted him, in 1856, when Jacques Etienne Marconis de Negre, Grand Hierophant of the Rite of Memphis, came to America and tendered him the Grand Mastership of the Rite in the United States. and the ancient and accepted rite offered him an honorary 33rd degree to refuse both. The Temple was the last European secret organization which, as a body, had in its possession some of the mysteries of the East. True, there were in the past century, and perhaps still are, isolated brothers, faithfully and secretly working under the direction of the Eastern Brotherhoods. But these, when they did belong to European societies, invariably joined them for objects unknown to the fraternity, though at the same time for the benefit of the latter. It is through them that the modern Masons have all they know of importance, and the similarity now found between the speculative rites of antiquity, the mysteries of the Essenes, Gnostics, and the Hindus, and the highest and oldest of the Masonic degrees well prove the fact. If these mysterious brothers had become possessed of their secrets of the societies, they could never reciprocate the confidence, though in their hands these secrets were safer, perhaps, than in the keeping of European Masons. When certain of the latter were found worthy of becoming affiliates of the Orient, they were secretly instructed and initiated, but the others were none the wiser for that. That's what I was talking about, that one mother-father rule right there. No one could ever lay hands on the Rosicrucians, and notwithstanding the alleged discoveries of secret chambers, vellums called tea, and of fossil nights with ever-burning lamps, this ancient association and its true aims are to this day a mystery. Pretended Templars and shams Rose-Croix, with a few genuine Kabbalists, were occasionally burned, and some unlucky theosophists and alchemists sought and put to the torture. Delusive confessions even were wrung from them by the most ferocious means. But yet, the true society remains today, as it has ever been, unknown to all, especially to its cruelest enemy, the Church. As to the modern Knights Templar and those Masonic lodges which now claim a direct descent from the ancient Templars, their persecution by the Church was a farce from the beginning. They have not, nor have they ever had, any secrets dangerous to the Church. Quite the contrary, for we find J.G. Fendel saying that the Scottish degrees, or the Templar system, only dates from 1735 to 1740, and, following its Catholic tendency, took up its chief residence in the Jesuit College of Clermont in Paris, and hence was called the Clermont system. The present Swedish system has also something of the Templar element in it, but free from Jesuits and interference with politics. However, it asserts that it has Molay's testament in the original, for a Count Beaujeu, a nephew of Molay, never heard of elsewhere, says Fendel, transplanted Templarism into Freemasonry, and thus procured for his uncle's ashes a mysterious sepulchre. It is sufficient to prove this is a Masonic fable, that on this pretended monument, the day of Molay's funeral is represented as March 11th, 1313, while the day of his death was March 19th, 1313. This spurious production, which is neither genuine Templarism nor genuine Freemasonry, has never taken firm root in Germany, but the case is otherwise in France. Writing upon this subject, we must hear what Wilkie has to say of these pretensions. The present Knights Templars of Paris will have it that they are the direct descendants from the ancient knights, and endeavor to prove this by documents, interior regulations, and secret doctrines. Forias says the fraternity of Freemasons was founded in Egypt, Moses communicating the secret teachings to the Israelites, Jesus to the apostles, and thence it found its way to the Knights Templars. Such inventions are necessary to the assertion that the Parisian Templars are the offspring of the ancient order. All these asseverations, unsupported by history, were fabricated in the high chapter of Clermont, Jesuits, and preserved by the Parisian Templars as a legacy left them by those political revolutionists, the Stuarts, and the Jesuits. Hence we find the bishops Gregory and Munter supporting them. Connecting the modern with the ancient Templars, we can at best, therefore, allow them an adoption of certain rites and ceremonies of purely ecclesiastical character, after they had been cunningly inculcated into that grand and antique order by the clergy. Since this desecration, it gradually lost its primitive and simple character, and went fast to its final ruin. Founded in 1118 by the knights Hugh de Payens and Geoffroy de Saint-Omer, nominally for the protection of the pilgrims, its true aim was the restoration of the primitive, secret worship. The true version of the history of Jesus and the early Christianity was imparted to Hugh de Payens by the Grand Pontiff of the Order of the Temple of the Nazarene or Johannite sect, one named Theoclites, after which it was learned by some knights in Palestine, from the higher and more intellectual members of the St. John sect, who were initiated into its mysteries. Freedom of intellectual thought and the restoration of one and universal religion was their secret object. Sworn to the vow of obedience, poverty, and chastity, they were at first the true knights of John the Baptist, crying in the wilderness and living on wild honey and locusts. Such is the tradition and the true Kabbalistic version. It is a mistake to state that the order became only later anti-Catholic. It was so from the beginning, and the red cross on the white mantle, the vestment of the order, had the same significance as with the initiates in every other country. It pointed to the four quarters of the compass and was the emblem of the universe. When, later, the Brotherhood was transformed into a lodge, the Templars had, in order to avoid persecution, to perform their own ceremonies in the greatest secrecy, generally in the hall of the chapter, more frequently in isolated caves or country houses built amidst woods, while the ecclesiastical form of worship was carried on publicly in the chapels belonging to the order. Though the accusations brought against them by order of Philip IV, many were infamously false. The main charges were certainly correct from the standpoint of what is considered by the Church heresy. The present-day Templars, adhering strictly as they do to the Bible, can hardly claim descent from those who did not believe in Christ as God-man, or as the Savior of the world, who rejected the miracle of his birth and those performed by himself, who did not believe in the transubstantiation, the saints, holy relics, purgatory, etc. The Christ Jesus was, in their opinion, a false prophet, but the man Jesus, a brother. They regarded John the Baptist as their patron, but never viewed him in the light in which he is presented in the Bible. They reverenced the doctrines of alchemy, astrology, magic, Kabbalistic talismans, and adhered to the secret teachings of the chiefs in the East. In the last century, says Fendel, when Freemasonry erroneously supposed herself the daughter of Templarism, great pains were taken to regard the order of the Knights Templars as innocent. For this purpose, not only legends and unrecorded events were fabricated, but pains were taken to repress the truth. The Masonic admirers of the Knights Templar brought up the whole of the documents of the lawsuit published by Moldenwaher, because they proved the culpability of the order. This culpability consisted in their heresy against the Roman Catholic Church, while the real brothers died an ignominious death. The spurious order which tried to step into their shoes became exclusively a branch of Jesuits under the immediate tutelage of the latter. True-hearted, honest Masons ought to reject with horror any connection, let alone descent from these. The Knights of St. John of Jerusalem, writes Commander Gordon, sometimes called the Knights Hospitallers, and the Knights of Malta, when not Freemasons. On the contrary, they seem to have been inimical to Freemasonry, for in 1740 the Grand Master of the Order of Malta caused the bull of Pope Clement XII to be published in the island, and forbade the meetings of the Freemasons. On this occasion several knights and many citizens left the island, and in 1741 the Inquisition persecuted the Freemasons in Malta. The Grand Master prescribed their assemblies under severe penalties, and 6 knights were banished from the island in perpetuity for having assisted a meeting. In fact, unlike the Templars, they had not even a secret form of reception. Helena says that he was unable to procure a copy of the secret ritual of the Knights of Malta. The reason is obvious. There was none. And yet, American Templarism comprises 3 degrees. 1. Knight of the Red Cross. 2. Knight Templar, and 3. Knight of Malta. It was introduced from France into the United States in 1808, and the first Grand Encampment General was organized on June 20th, 1816, with Governor DeWitt Clinton of New York as Grand Master. This inheritance of the Jesuits should hardly be boasted of. If the Knights Templar desire to make good their claims, they must choose between a descent from the heretical, anti-Christian, Kabbalistic primitive Templars, or connect themselves with the Jesuits and nail their tessellated carpets directly on the platform of ultra-Catholicism. Otherwise, their claims become mere pretense. So impossible does it become for the originators of the ecclesiastical pseudo-order of Templars, invented, according to Dupuy in France, by the adherents of the Stuarts, to avoid being considered a branch of the order of the Jesuits, that we are not surprised to see an anonymous author, rightly suspected of belonging to the Jesuit chapter at Clermont, publishing a work in 1751 in Brussels on the lawsuit of the Knights Templar. In this volume, in sundry mutilated notes, additions, and commentaries, he represents the innocence of the Templars of the accusation of heresy, thus robbing them of the greatest title to respect and admiration that these early freethinkers and martyrs have won. The last pseudo-order was constituted at Paris on the 4th of November, 1804, by virtue of a forged constitution, and ever since it has contaminated genuine Freemasonry, as the highest Masons themselves tell us. Les Shorts de Transmission Tabula Aurora Larmini presents the outward appearance of such extreme antiquity, that Gregoire confesses that if all the other relics of the Parisian treasury of the order had not silenced his doubts as to the ancient descent, the sight of this charter would at the very first glance have persuaded him. The first Grand Master of this spurious order was a physician of Paris, Dr. Faure Palaprat, who assumed the name of Bernard Raymond.
Count Ramsay, a Jesuit, was the first to start the idea of the Templars being joined to the Knights of Malta. Therefore, we read from his pen the following.
Our forefathers, the Crusaders, assembled in the Holy Land from all Christendom, wished to unite in the fraternity embracing all nations, that when bound together heart and soul for mutual improvement, they might, in the course of time, represent one single intellectual people. This is why the Templars are made to join the St. John's Knights, and the latter got into the craft of Masonry, known as St. John's Masons. In the Sceaux Rompu in 1745, we find, therefore, the following most impotent falsehood, worthy of the sons of Loyola. The lodges were dedicated to St. John, because the Knights Masons had in the Holy Wars in Palestine joined the Knights of St. John. In 1743, the Kadosh decree was invented at Lyons. So writes Thory, at least, and it represents the revenge of the Templars. And here we find Fendel saying that the order of the Knights Templars had been abolished in 1311, and to that epoch they were obliged to have recourse when, after the banishment of several knights from Malta in 1740, because they were Freemasons, it was no longer possible to keep up the connection with the order of St. John or Knights of Malta. Then, in the plenitude of their power, under the sovereignty of the Pope. Turning to Clavel, one of the best Masonic authorities, we read, It is clear that the erection of the French Order of the Knights Templar is not more ancient than the year 1804, and that it cannot lay at any legitimate claim to being the continuation of the so-called Society of la Petite Resurrection des Templiers, nor this latter either extend back to the ancient order of the Knights Templars. Therefore, we see these pseudo-Templars, under the guidance of the worthy Father Jesuits, forging in Paris, 1806, the famous charter of Arminius. 20 years later, the nefast and subterranean body, guiding the hands of assassins, directed it toward one of the best and greatest princes in Europe, whose mysterious death, unfortunately for the interest of truth and justice, has never been, for political reasons, investigated and proclaimed to the world as it ought to have been. It is this prince, a Freemason himself, who was the last depository of the secrets of the true Knights Templar. For long centuries these had remained unknown and unsuspected, holding their meetings once every 13 years at Malta, and their Grand Master advising the European brothers of the place of rendezvous. But a few hours in advance, these representatives of the once mightiest and most glorious body of knights assembled on the fixed day from various points on the earth. 13 in number, in commemoration of the year of the death of Jacques Molay, 1313, the now Eastern brothers, among whom were crowned heads, planned together the future religious and political fate of the nations, while the Popish knights, their murderous and bastard successors, slept soundly in their beds, without a dream disturbing their guilty consciences. And yet, says Revolt, notwithstanding the confusion they had created, 1736 to 72, the Jesuits had accomplished but one of their designs, viz., denaturalizing and bringing into disrepute the Masonic institution. Having succeeded, as they believed, in destroying it in one form, they were determined to use it in another. With this determination they arranged the system-tiled clerkship of the Templars, an amalgamation of the different histories, events, and characteristics of the Crusades, mixed with the reveries of the alchemists. In this combination Catholicism governed all, and the whole fabrication moved upon wheels, representing the great object for which the Society of Jesus was organized. Hence, the rites and symbols of Masonry, which, though pagan in origin, are all applied in all flavor of Christianity. A Mason has to declare his belief in a personal God, Jehovah, and in the encampment degrees, also in Christ, before he can be accepted in the lodge, while the Johannite Templars believed in the unknown and invisible principle, whence proceeded the creative powers, misnamed gods, and held to the Nazarene version of Ben Panther being the sinful father of Jesus, who thus proclaimed himself the Son of God and of humanity. This also accounts for the fearful oaths of the Masons taken on the Bible, for their lectures servilely agreeing with the patriarcho-biblical chronology. In the American Order of the Rose Cross, for instance, when the neophyte approaches the altar, the Sir Knights are called to order, and the Captain of the Guard makes his proclamation. To the glory of the sublime Architect of the universe, Jehovah Bine, under the auspices of the sovereign sanctuary of the ancient and primitive Freemasonry, etc., etc. Then the knight orator strikes one and tells the neophyte that the antique legends of Masonry date back 40 centuries, claiming no greater antiquity for the oldest of them than 622 A.M., at which time he says Noah was born. Under the circumstances, this will be regarded as a liberal concession to chronological preferences. After that, Masons are apprised that it was about the year 2188 B.C. that Mizraim led colonies into Egypt and laid the foundation of the Kingdom of Egypt, which lasted 1,663 years. Strange chronology, which, if it piously conforms with that of the Bible, disagrees entirely with that of history. The mythical 9 names of the deity, imported into Egypt according to the Masons only in the 22nd century B.C., are found on monuments reckoned twice as old by the best Egyptologists. Nevertheless, we must take at the same time into consideration that the Masons are themselves ignorant of these names. The simple truth is that modern Masonry is a sadly different thing from the once universal secret fraternity was in the days when the Brahma worshippers of the Om exchanged grips and passwords with the devotees of Dum, and the adepts of every country under the sun were brothers. What was then that mysterious name, that mighty word, through whose potency the Hindu as well as the Chaldean and Egyptian initiate performed his wonders? In chapter 115 of the Egyptian funeral ritual, entitled The Chapter of Coming Out to the Heaven and of Knowing the Spirits of An, Heliopolis, Horace says, I knew the spirits of An. The greatest glorious does not pass over it unless the gods give me the word. I got a word. In another hymn, the soul, transformed, exclaims, "Make road for me to Rusta. I am the Great One, dressed as the Great One. I have come, I have come. Delicious to me are the kings of Osiris. I am creating the water through the power of the word. Have I not seen the hidden secrets? I have given truth to the sun. I am clear. I am adored for my purity." 117 to 119. The chapters of the going into and coming out from the rooster. In another place, the mummy's role expresses the following: "I am the great God Spirit, existing of myself, the creator of his name. I know the name of this great God that is here." Jesus is accused by his enemies of having wrought miracles and shown by his own apostles to have expelled demons by the power of the ineffable name. The former firmly believed that he had stolen it in the sanctuary. "And he cast out the spirits with his word and healed all that was sick." Matthew 18:16. When the Jewish rulers asked Peter in Acts 4:7, "By what power or by what name have ye done this?" Peter replies, "By the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth." But does it mean the name of Christ, as the interpreters would make us believe, or does it signify, "By the name which is in the possession of Jesus of Nazareth"? The initiate, who was accused by the Jews to have learned it, but who had it really through his initiation. Besides, he states repeatedly that all he does in his Father's name, not in his own. That is an absolute truth. But who of the modern Masons has ever heard it pronounced? In their own ritual, they confess that they never have. The Sir Orator tells the Sir Knight that the passwords which he received in the preceding degrees are all so many corruptions of the true name of God engraved on the triangle, and that therefore they have adopted a substitute for it. I just found out what the triangle was. Shout out to Green County Agroforestry for letting me know that they have this cipher that they use in moving the starting point in a specific manner, allows them to cipher what they need to. And they get that upon initiation. I didn't know that because I'm not part of any clubs or anything, and I haven't seen it written anywhere, so shout out for pointing that out. I'm happy to have good knowledge. Such also is the case in the Blue Lodge, where the master, representing King Solomon, agrees with King Hiram that the word shall be used as a substitute for the master's word until wiser ages shall discover the true one. I've got one, but I can't give it to you. I'm sorry. I will if I'm given leave, but I can't. What senior deacon of all the thousands who have assisted in bringing candidates from darkness to light, or what master who has whispered this mystic word into the ears of superstitious hierophants while holding them on the 5 points of fellowship, has suspected the real meaning of even this substitute which they impart at low breath? How few new-made Master Masons but go away imagining that it has some occult connection with the marrow in the bone. What do they know of that mystical personages known to some adepts as the Venerable Ma, or of the mysterious Eastern brothers who obey him, whose name is abbreviated in the first syllable of the 3 which compose the Masonic substitute? The Ma, who lives at this very day in a spot unknown to all but initiates, and the approaches to which they are through trackless wilderness, untrodden by Jesuit or missionary foot, for it is beset by dangers fit to appall the most courageous explorers. And yet, for generations, this meaningless jingle of vowels and consonants has been repeated in novacate ears, and though it possessed even so much potency as would deflect from its course a thistledown floating in the air. Like Christianity, Freemasonry is a corpse from which the spirit long ago fled. In this connection, place may be well given to a letter from Mr. Charles Sotheran, corresponding secretary of the New York Liberal Club, which was received by us on the day after the date it bears. Mr. Sutherland is known as a writer and lecturer on antiquarian, mystical, and other subjects. In Masonry, he has taken so many of the degrees as to be a competent authority as regards the craft. He is a 32nd degree A and PR, 94 degree Memphis KR Knight of the Rose Cross, K Kadash MM 104, etc. He is also an initiate of the Modern English Brotherhood of the Rosy Cross and other secret societies, and a Masonic editor of the New York Advocate. Following is the letter which we place before the Masons, as we desire that they should see what one of their own number has to say. New York Press Club, January the 11th of 1877. In response to your letter, I willingly furnish the information desired with respect to the antiquity and present condition of Freemasonry. This I do the more cheerfully since we belong to the same secret societies, and you can thus better appreciate the necessity for the reserve which, at times, I shall be obliged to exhibit. You rightly refer to the fact that Freemasonry, no less than the effete theologies of the day, has its fabulous history to narrate. Clogged up as the order has been by the rubbish and drift of absurd biblical legends, it is no wonder that its usefulness has been impaired and its work as a civilizer hampered. Fortunately, the great anti-Masonic excitement that raged in the United States during a portion of this century forced a considerable band of workers to delve into the true origin of the craft and bring about a healthier state of things. The agitation in America also spread to Europe, and the literary effects of Masonic authors on both sides of the Atlantic, such as Rebold, Fendel, Heinemann, Mitchell, Mackenzie, Hugin, Yarker, and others well known to the fraternity, is now a matter of history. One effect of their labors has been, in a great measure, to bring the history of Masonry into open daylight, where even its teachings, jurisprudence, and ritual are no longer secret from those of the profane, who have the wit to read as they run. You are correct in saying that the Bible is the great light of European and American Masonry. In consequence of this theistic conception of God and the biblical cosmogony have been ever considered two of its great cornerstones. Its chronology seems also to have been based upon the same pseudo-revelation. Thus, Dr. Dalco, in one of his treatises, asserts that the principles of the Masonic order were presented at and coeval with the creation. It is therefore not astonishing that such a pundit should go on to state that God was the first Grand Master, Adam the second, and the last named initiate, Eve, into the great mystery, as I suppose many a priestess of Cybele and Lady Kadosh were afterward. The Reverend Dr. Oliver, another Masonic authority, gravely records what may be termed the minutes of a lodge where Moses presided as Grand Master, Joshua as Deputy Grand Master, and Aholiab and Bezaleel as Grand Wardens. The temple at Jerusalem, which recent archaeologists have shown to be a structure which nothing like the pretended antiquity of its erection, and incorrectly called after a monarch whose name proves his mystical character, Sol On, the name of the sun in 3 languages, plays, as you correctly observe, a considerable share in Masonic mystery. Such fables as these, and the traditional Masonic colonization of ancient Egypt, have given the craft the credit of an illustrious origin to which it has no right, and before whose 40 centuries of legendary history the mythologies of Greece and Rome fade into insignificance. The Egyptian, Chaldean, and other theories necessary to each fabricator of high degrees have also had their short period of prominence. The last axe to grind has consecutively been the fruitful mother of unproductiveness. We both agree that all the ancient priesthoods had their esoteric doctrines and secret ceremonies. From the Essenic Brotherhood, an evolution of the Hindu gymnosophist, doubtlessly proceeded the solidarities of Greece and Rome as described by the so-called pagan writers. Founded on these, and copying them in the matter of which rituals, signs, grips, passwords, etc., were developed, the medieval guilds, like the present liveries companies of London, the relics of the English trade guilds, the operative Masons were but a guild of workmen with higher pretensions. From the French name Macon, derived from mas, an old Norman noun meaning a house, comes our English mason, a house builder. As the London companies alluded to present, now and again, the freedom of the liveries to outsiders, so we find the trade guilds of Masons doing the same. Thus, the founder of the Ashmolean Museum was made free of the Masons at Warrington in Lancashire, England, on the 16th October 1646. The entrance of such men as Elias Ashmole into the operative fraternity paved the way for the great Masonic Revolution of 1717, when speculative Masonry came into existence. The constitutions of 1723 and 1738 by the Masonic impostor Anderson were written up for the newly fledged and first Grand Lodge of Free and Accepted Masons of England, from which body all others over the world hail today. These bonus constitutions, written by Anderson, were compiled about then, and in order to palm off his miserable rubbish in-clipped history on the craft, he had the audacity to state that nearly all of the documents relating to Masonry in England had been destroyed by the 1717 reformers. Happily, in the British Museum, Bodleian Library, and other public institutions, Rebold, Huhan, and others have discovered sufficient evidence in the shape of the old operative Masonic charges to disprove this statement. The same writers, I think, have conclusively upset the tenability of two other documents palmed upon Masonry, namely, the spurious Charter of Cologne of 1535, and the forged questions, supposed to have been written by Leland, the antiquary, from a manuscript of King Henry VI of England. In the last named, Pythagoras is referred to as having formed a great lodge at Crotona and made many Masons, some of whom travelled into France, and there made many, from whence, in process of time, the art passed into England. Sir Christopher Wren, architect of St. Paul's Cathedral, London, often called the Grand Master of Freemasons, was simply the master or president of the London Operative Masons Company. If such a tissue of fable could interweave itself into the history of the Grand Lodges, which now have charge of the first three symbolical degrees, it is hardly astonishing that the same fate should befall nearly all of the high Masonic degrees, which have been aptly termed an incoherent medley of opposite principles. It is curious to note, too, that most of the bodies which work these, such as the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite, the Rite of Avignon, the Order of the Temple, Fessler's Rite, the Grand Council of the Emperors of the East and West, Sovereign Prince Masons, etc., etc., are nearly all the offspring of the legitimate son of the sons of Ignatius Loyola. The Baron Hunt, Chevalier Ramsay, Seschuris, Dendorf, and numerous others who founded the grades in the rites worked under instructions from the general of the Jesuits. The nest where these high degrees were hatched, and no Masonic rite is free from their baleful influence, more or less, was the Jesuit College of Clermont at Paris. That bastard foundling of Freemasonry, the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite, which is unrecognized by the Blue Lodges, was the enunciation, primarily, of the brain of the Jesuit Chevalier Ramsay. It was brought by him to England in 1736-38 to aid the cause of the Catholic Stuarts. The rite in its present form of 33 degrees was reorganized at the end of the 18th century by some half-dozen Masonic adventurers at Charleston, South Carolina. Two of these, Pilette, a tailor, and a dancing master named Lacorne, were fitting predecessors for a later resuscitation by a gentleman of the name of Gorgas, employed in the aristocratic occupation of a ship's clerk on a boat trading between the New York and Liverpool. Dr. Crucifix, alias Gauss, the inventor of certain patent medicines of an objectionable character, ran the institution in England. The powers under which these worthies acted was a document claimed to have been signed by Frederick the Great at Berlin on May 1st, 1786, and by which were revised the Masonic constitution and status of the high degrees of the ancient and accepted rite. This paper was an impudent forgery, and necessitated the issuing of a protocol by the Grand Lodges of the 3 globes of Berlin, which conclusively proved the whole arrangement to be false in every particular. On claims supported by the supposititious document, the ancient and accepted rite have swindled their confiding brothers in the Americas and in Europe out of thousands of dollars, to the shame and discredit of humanity. The modern Templars, whom you refer to in your letter, are but mere magpies and peacock's plumes. The aim of the Masonic Templars is the sectarianization, or rather Christianizing, of Masonry, a fraternity which is supposed to admit a Jew, Parsi, Mohammedan, Buddhist, in fact every religionist within its portals who accepts the doctrine of a personal God and spirit immortality. According to the belief of a section, if not all of the Israelites, belonging to the craft in America, Templarism is Jesuitism. It seems strange, now, that the belief in a personal God is becoming extinct, and that even the theologian has transformed his deity into an indescribable nondescript, that there are those who stand in the way of the general acceptation of the sublime pantheism of the primeval Orientals, of Jacob Boehme, of Spinoza, often in the Grand Lodge and subordinate lodges of this and other jurisdictions. The old doxology is sung with its praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, to the disgust of Israelites and free-thinking brethren, who are thus unnecessarily insulted. This could never occur in India, where the great light in a lodge may be the Quran, the Zend-Avesta, or one of the Vedas. The sectarian Christian spirit in Masonry must be put down. Today there are German Grand Lodges which will not allow Jews to be initiated, or Israelites from foreign countries to be accepted as brethren within their jurisdiction. The French Masons have, however, revolted against this tyranny, and the Grand Orient of France does now permit the atheists and materialists to fellowship in the craft. A standing rebuke upon the claimed universality of Masonry is the fact that the French brethren are now repudiated. Notwithstanding its many faults, and speculative Masonry is but human, and therefore fallible. There is no institution that has done so much, and is yet capable of such great undertakings in the future, for human, religious, and political improvement. In the last century, the Illuminati taught peace with the cottage, war with the palace, throughout the length and breadth of Europe. In the last century, the United States was freed from the tyranny of the mother country by the actions of the secret societies, more than is commonly imagined. Washington, Lafayette, Franklin, Jefferson, Hamilton were Masons, and in the 19th century it was Grand Master Garibaldi, 33, who unified Italy, working in accordance with the spirit of the faithful brotherhoods, as the Masonic, or rather Carbonari, principles of liberty, equality, humanity, independence, unity, taught for years by brothers Joseph Manzini. Speculative Masonry has much, too, within its ranks to do. One is to accept women as co-worker of man in the struggle of life, as the Hungarian Masons have done lately by initiating the Countess Heideck. Another important thing is also to recognize practically the brotherhood of all humanity by refusing none on account of color, race, position, or creed. The dark skin should not be only theoretically the brother of the light. The colored Masons who have been duly and regularly raised stand at every lodge door in America, craving admission, and they are refused. And there is South America to be conquered as to a participation in the duties of humanity. If Masonry be, as claimed, a progressive science and a school of pure religion, it should ever be found in the advance guard of civilization, not in the rear. If it be but an empirical effort, a crude attempt of humanity to solve some of the deepest problems of the race, and no more, then it must give place to fitter successors, perchance one of those that you and I know of, one that may have acted the prompter at the side of the chiefs of the order, during its greatest triumphs, whispering to them, as the demon did in the year of Socrates, "Yours most sincerely, Charles Sutherland." Thus falls to the ruins of the grand epic poem of Masons, sung by so many mysterious knights as another revealed gospel. As we see, the Temple of Solomon is being undermined and brought to the ground by its own chief master masons of this century. But if, following the ingenious exoteric description of the Bible, there are yet masons who persist in regarding it as once an actual structure, who, of the students of the esoteric doctrine, will ever consider this mythic temple otherwise than an allegory embodying the secret science? Whether or not there ever was a real temple of that name, we may well leave to archaeologists to decide, but that the detailed description thereof in 1 Kings is purely allegorical, no serious scholar proficient in the ancient as well as the medieval jargon of the Kabbalist and alchemist can doubt. The building of the Temple of Solomon is the symbolical representation of the gradual acquirement of the secret wisdom, or magic, the erection and development of the spiritual from the earthly, the manifestation of the power and splendor of the spirit in the physical world, through the wisdom and genius of the builder. The latter, when he has become an adept, is mightier than the King Solomon himself, the emblem of the sun or light himself, the light of the real subjective world, shining in the darkness of the objective universe. This is the temple, which can be reared without the sound of the hammer or any tool of iron being heard in the house while it is in building. In the East, this science is called in some places the seven-storied, in others the nine-storied temple. Every story answers allegorically to a degree of knowledge acquired. Throughout the countries of the Orient, wherever magic and the wisdom religion are studied, its practitioners and students are known among their craft as builders, for they build the temple of knowledge of secret science. Those of the adepts who are active are styled practical or operative builders, while the students or neophytes are classed as speculative or theoretical. The former exemplify in works their control over the forces of inanimate as well as animate nature. The latter are but perfecting themselves in the rudiments of sacred science. These terms were evidently borrowed at the beginning by the unknown founders of the first Masonic guilds. In the now popular jargon, operative masons are understood to be the bricklayers and the handicraftsmen, who composed the craft down to St. Christopher Wren's time, and speculative masons, all members of the order, as now understood. The sentence attributed to Jesus, "Thou art Peter, upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it," disfigured as it is by mistranslation and misinterpretation, plainly indicates its real meaning. We have shown the signification of Peter and Petra with the Hierophants. The interpretation traced on the tables of stone in the final initiation was handed by the initiator to the chosen future interpreter. Having acquainted himself with its mysterious contents, which revealed to him the mysteries of creation, the initiated became a builder himself, for he was made acquainted with the dodecahedron, or the geometrical figure on which the universe was built. To what he had learned in previous initiations of the use of the rule and of architectural principles was added a cross, the perpendicular and horizontal lines of which were supposed to form the foundation of the spiritual temple. By placing them across the junction, or the central primordial point, the element of all existences, representing the first concrete idea of deity. Henceforth, he could, as a master builder, erect the temple of wisdom on that rock of Petra for himself, and having laid a secure foundation, let another build thereon. The Egyptian hierophant was given a square headdress, which he had to wear always, and a square, see Mason's marks, without which he could never go abroad. The perfect Tao was Tao formed of the perpendicular, descending male ray, or spirit, and horizontal line, or matter, female ray, and the mundane circle was an attribute of Isis. And it is but at his death that the Egyptian cross was laid on the breast of his mummy. These square hats were worn unto this day by the Armenian priests. The claim that the cross is purely a Christian symbol, introduced after our era, is strange indeed, when we find Ezekiel stamping the foreheads of the men of Judah, who feared the Lord, with the signa Tau, as it is translated in the Vulgate. In the ancient Hebrew, the sign was formed thus. You would have to look at it, it's more like an X. But in the original Egyptian hieroglyphics, as a perfect Christian cross. In the Revelation, also, the Alpha and Omega, spirit and matter, the first and the last, stamps the name of his Father in the foreheads of the elect. And if our statements are wrong, if Jesus was not an initiate, a master builder or master mason, as it is called now, how comes it that on the most ancient cathedrals we find his figure with mason marks around his person? Because the people who built it were masons. In the Cathedral of Santa Croce, Florence, over the main portal we can be seen the figure of Christ holding a perfect square in his hand. That is somebody representing him, and them being masons inserting their own beliefs is definitely not outside of the question. The surviving master builders of this operative craft of the true temple may go literally half naked and wander slipshod forever. Now, not for the sake of a puerile ceremony, but because, like the Son of Man, they have not where to lay their heads, and yet be the only surviving possessors of the Word. Their cable toe is the sacred triple cord of certain Brahmin sannyasi, or the string on which certain lamas hang their U-stone. But with these apparently valueless talismans, not one of them would part for all of the wealth of Solomon and Sheba. The seven-knotted bamboo stick of the fakir can become as powerful as the rod of Moses, which was created between the evenings, and on which was engraven and set forth the great and glorious name with which he was to do the wonders in Mizraim. But these operative workmen have no fear that their secrets will be disclosed by treacherous ex-high priest of chapters, though their generation may have received them through others than Moses, Solomon, and Zerubbabel. At Moses, Michael Hayes, the Israelite brother who introduced Royal Arch Masonry into this country in December of 1778, had a prophetic presentiment of future treasons, he might have instituted more efficacious obligations than he has. Truly, the grand, omnific Royal Arch Word, long lost but now found, has fulfilled his prophetic promise. The password of that degree is no more, I am that I am. It is now simply, I was, but I am no more. I don't know this language. That we may not be accused of vain boasting, we shall give the keys to several of the secret ciphers of the most exclusive and important of the so-called higher Masonic degrees. If we mistake not, these, having never before been revealed to the outside world, except that of the Royal Arch Masons in 1830, but have been most jealously guarded within the various orders, we are under neither promise, obligation, nor oath, and therefore violate no confidence. That's where I'm at too, right? I'm not part of any of these clubs. Our purpose is not to gratify an idle curiosity. We wish merely to show Masons and the affiliates of all other Western societies, the Company of Jesus included, that it is impossible for them to secure in the possession of any secrets that it is worth in Eastern Brotherhoods while to discover. Inferentially, it may also show them that if the latter can lift the mask of European societies, they are nevertheless successful in wearing their own visors. For, if any one thing is universally acknowledged, it is that the real secrets of not a single surviving ancient brotherhood are in possession of the profane. Some of these ciphers were used by the Jesuits in their secret correspondence at the time of the Jacobin conspiracy. And when Masonry, the alleged successor to the temple, was employed by the church for political purposes. Findel says, see his history of Freemasonry, that in the 18th century, besides the modern Knights Templar, we see the Jesuits disfiguring the fair face of Freemasonry. Many Masonic authors, who were fully cognizant of the period and knew exactly all the incidents occurring, positively assert that then and still later the Jesuits exercised a pernicious influence, or at least endeavored to do so, upon the fraternity. Of the Rosicrucian order he remarks, upon the authority of Professor Woog, that its aim at first was nothing less than the support and advancement of Catholicism, when this religion manifested a determination entirely to repress liberty of thought. The Rosicrucians enlarged their designs likewise to check, if possible, the progress of this widely spreading enlightenment. In the Sincerus Renatus, the truly converted, of S. Richter of Berlin, 1714, we note that laws were communicated for the government of the Golden Rosicrucians, which bear unmistakable evidences of Jesuitical intervention. We will begin with the cryptographs of the sovereign princes Rose-Croix, also styled Knights of St. Andrew, Knights of the Eagle and Pelican, Herodum, Rosia Crucius, Rosy Cross, Triple Cross, Perfect Brother, Prince Mason, and so on. The Herodum Rosy Cross also claims a Templar origin in 1314. I am not going to attempt to read through the cipher. You are more than welcome to go back to the link that is provided down below to the original source material and peruse this at your leisure. It is a key to a code. There's not much more that I can add to that without just doing a bunch of numbers and letters. So the Knights Kadosh have another cipher, or rather hieroglyph, which in this case is taken from the Hebrew, possibly to be more in keeping with the Bible Kadashim of the temple, and again another cipher. As for the Royal Ark cipher, it has been exposed before now, but we may as well present it slightly amplified. The cipher consists of certain combinations of right angles, with or without points or dots. Following is the basis of its formation. This is what Green Forest Agriculture, or Green County Agroforest, was talking about right here. I'm fairly positive, right? You can shift by whatever point where you start in the cipher, and that keeps it kind of randomized for people. Now, the alphabet consists of 26 letters, and these two signs being dissected form 13 distinct characters. Thus, we're not going to read through this. It won't make sense without the context of the letters and numbers, and I'm not all that concerned about their cipher. The fact that they have one is enough for me. Let this suffice. We might, if we choose, give the cipher alphabets with their keys of another method of the Royal Ark Masons, strongly resembling a certain Hindu character of the G, L, of the Mystic City, of a well-known form of the Devanagari script of the French sages of the pyramids, and of the Sublime Master of the Great Work, and others. But we refrain, only be it understood for the reason that some of these alone, of all the side branches of the original Blue Lodge Freemasonry, contain the promise of a useful future. As for the rest, they may and will go to the ash heap of time. High Masons will understand what we mean. We must now give some proofs of what we have stated, and demonstrate that the word Jehovah, if Masonry adheres to it, will ever remain as a substitute, never be identical with the lost mirific name. This is so well known to the Kabbalists that in their careful etymology they show it beyond doubt to be the only one of the many substitutes for the real name, and composed of the twofold name of the first androgyne, Adam and Eve, Yod or Yod, Vow and Hiva, the female serpent, as a symbol of divine intelligence proceeding from the one generative or creative spirit. Thus, Jehovah is not the sacred name at all. Had Moses given to Pharaoh the true name, the latter would not have answered as he did, for the Egyptian king initiates knew it as well as Moses, who had learned it with him. The name was at that time the common property of the adepts of all the nations of the world, and the Pharaoh knew certainly the name of the highest god mentioned in the Book of the Dead. But instead of that, Moses, if we accept the allegory of Exodus literally, gives Pharaoh the name of Yiva, the expression or form of the divine name used by all the Targums as passed by Moses. Hence Pharaoh's reply, "And who is that Yiva, that I should obey his voice?" Jehovah dates only from the Masoretic innovation, when the rabbis, for fear that they should lose the keys to their own doctrines, then written exclusively in consonants, began to insert their vowel points in the manuscripts. They were utterly ignorant of the true pronunciation of the name. Hence, they gave it the sound of Adonai, and made it read Jehovah. Thus, the latter is simply a fancy, a perversion of the holy name. And how could they know it? Alone, out of all the nations, the high priest had it in their possession, and respectively passed it to their successors, as the Hindu Brahmamata does before his death. Once a year only, on the Day of Atonement, the high priest was announced aloud to pronounce it in a whisper. Passing behind the veil into the inner chamber of the sanctuary, the Holy of Holies, with trembling lips and downcast eyes, he called upon the dreaded name. The bitter persecution of the Kabbalists who received the precious syllables after deserving the favor by a whole life of sanctity was due to a suspicion that they misused it. At the opening of this chapter, we have told the story of Simeon ben Ioki, one of the victims to this priceless knowledge, and see how little he deserved his cruel treatment. The Book of Yashar, a work, as we are told by a very learned Hebrew divine of New York, composed in Spain in the 12th century as a popular tale, and that had not the sanction of the Rabbinical College of Venice, is full of Kabbalistical, alchemical, and magical allegories. Admitting so much, it must still be said that there are few popular tales but are based on historical truth. The Norsemen in Iceland, by Dr. G.W. Dasent, is also a collection of popular tales, but they contain the key to the primitive religious worship of that people. So with the Book of Jasher, it contains the whole of the Old Testament in a condensed form, and, as the Samaritans held, in example, the 5 books of Moses without the prophets. Although rejected by the Orthodox rabbis, we cannot help thinking that, as in the case of the apocryphal Gospels, which were written earlier than the canonical ones, the Book of Jasher is the true, original form from which the subsequent Bible was in part composed. Both the apocryphal Gospels and Jasher are a series of religious tales, in which miracle is heaped upon miracle, and which narrate the popular legend as they first originated, without any regard to either chronology or dogma. Both still are cornerstones of the Mosaic and Christian religions. That there was a Book of Jasher prior to the Mosaic Pentateuch is clear, for it is mentioned in Joshua, Isaiah, and 2 Samuel. Nowhere is the difference between the Elohist and Jehovahist so clearly shown as in Jasher. Jehovah is spoken of as the Ophites held him to be, a son of Elda-Baoth, or Saturn. In this book, the Egyptian Magi, when asked by Pharaoh, "Who is he of whom Moses speaks as the I Am?" reply that the God of Moses, we have learned, is the son of the wise, the son of the ancient kings. Chapter, not going to read it, 45. Now, those who assert that Jasher is a forgery of the 12th century, and we readily believe it, should nevertheless explain the curious fact that while the above text is not to be found in the Bible, the answer to it is, moreover, couched in unequivocal terms. As Isaiah, the Lord God, complained of it very wrathfully to the prophet, and says, Surely the princes of Zoan are fools, and the counsel of the wise counselors of Pharaoh is becoming brutish. How say ye unto Pharaoh, I am the son of the wise, the son of ancient kings? Which is evidently a reply to the above. At Joshua 10:13, Jasher is referred to in corroboration of the outrageous assertion that the sun stood still, and the moon stayed until the people had avenged themselves. Is not this written in the book of Jasher? Says the text, and at 2 Samuel 1:19, the same book is again quoted. Behold, it says, it is written in the book of Jasher. Clearly, Jasher must have existed and must have been regarded as authority, must have been older than Joshua. And, since the verse in Isaiah unerringly points to the passage above quoted, we have at least as much reason to accept the current edition of Jasher as a transcription, excerpt, or compilation of the original work, as we have to revere the Septuagint Pentateuch as the primitive Hebraic sacred records. At all events, Jehovah is not the ancient of the ancient, or the aged of the aged of the Zohar, for we find him, in this book, counseling with God the Father as to the creation of the world. The workmaster spoke to the Lord, let us make man after our image. Zohar 1, Fall 25. Jehovah is but the Metatron, and perhaps not even the highest, but only one of the eons, for he whom Onkelos calls Memro, the Word, is not the exoteric Jehovah of the Bible, nor is he Have, the existing one. It was the secrecy of the early Kabbalists who were anxious to screen the real mystery name of the Eternal from profanation, and later the prudence which the medieval alchemists and occultists were compelled to adopt to save their lives, that caused the inextricable confusion of divine names. This is what led the people to accept the Jehovah of the Bible as the name of the one living God. Every Jewish elder, prophet, and other man of any importance knew the difference. But, as the difference lay in the vocalization of the name, and its right pronunciation led to death, the common people were ignorant of it, for no initiate would risk his life by teaching it to them. Thus, the Sinaitic deity came gradually to be regarded as identical with him whose name is known but to the wise. When Capellus translates, whosoever shall pronounce the name of Jehovah shall suffer death, he made two mistakes. The first is in adding the final letter H to the name, if he wants this deity to be considered either male or androgynous, for the letter makes the name feminine, as it really should be, considering it is one of the names of Bina, the third emanation. His second error is in asserting that the word Nokeb means only to pronounce distinctly. It means to pronounce correctly. Therefore, the biblical name of Jehovah may be considered simply a substitute, which, as belonging to one of the powers, got to be viewed as that of the eternal. There is an evident mistake, one of the very many, in one of the Latin texts of Leviticus, which has been corrected by Cahan, and which proves that the interdiction did not at all concern the name of the exoteric Jehovah, whose numerous other names could also be pronounced without any penalty being incurred. In the vicious English version, the translation runs thus. And he that blasphemeth the name of the Lord shall surely be put to death. Leviticus 24:16. Cahan renders it far more correctly thus. And he that blasphemeth the name of the Eternal shall die, etc. The Eternal being something higher than the exoteric and personal Lord. As with the Gentile nations, the symbols of the Israelites were ever bearing, directly or indirectly, upon sun worship. The exoteric Jehovah of the Bible is a dual god, like all the other gods, and the fact that David, who is entirely ignorant of Moses, praises his Lord and assures him that the Lord is a great God and a great King above all gods, may be of a very great importance to the descendants of Jacob and David, but their national God concerns us in no wise. We are quite ready to show the Lord God of Israel, the same respect as we do to Brahma, Zeus, and any other secondary deity. But we decline most emphatically to recognize in him either the deity worshipped by Moses, or the father of Jesus, or yet the ineffable name of the Kabbalist. Jehovah is perhaps one of the Elohim who was concerned in the formation, which is not creation, of the universe, one of the architects who built from pre-existing matter, but he was never the unknowable cause that created bara. In the night of the eternity, these Elohim first form and bless, then they curse and destroy, as one of these powers, Jehovah, is therefore by turns beneficent and malevolent. At one moment he punishes and then repents. He is the antitype of several of the patriarchs, of Esau and of Jacob, the allegorical twins, emblems of the ever-manifested dual principle in nature. So, Jacob, who is Israel, is the left pillar, the feminine principle of Esau, who is the right pillar and the male principle. When he wrestles with Malachiho, the Lord, it is the latter who becomes the right pillar, and Jacob, Israel, names God. Although the Bible interpreters have endeavored to transform him into a mere angel of the Lord, Genesis 32, Jacob conquers him, as matter will, but too often conquers spirit. But his thigh is put out of joint in the fight. The name of the name of Israel has its derivation from Israel, or Asar, the sun god, who is known as Suriel, Surya, and Sur. Israel means striving with God. The sun rising upon Jacob Israel is the sun god Israel, fecundating matter, or earth, represented by the female Jacob. As usual, the allegory has more than one hidden meaning in the Kabbalah. Esau, Esu, is also the sun. Like the Lord, Esau fights with Jacob and prevails not. The sun god first strives against and then rises on him in covenant. And he passed over Penuel. The sun rose upon him, and he, Jacob, halted upon his thigh. Genesis 32:31. Israel, Jacob, opposed by his brother Esau, is Samuel, and the names of Samael are Azazel and Satan, the opposer. It will therefore, if it will be argued that Moses was unacquainted with the Hindu philosophy and therefore could not have taken Siva, the regenerator and the destroyer, as his model for Jehovah, then we must admit that there was some miraculous international intuition which prompted every nation to choose for its exoteric national deity the dual type we find in the Lord God of Israel. All of these fables speak for themselves. Siva, Jehovah, Osiris are all the symbols of active principle in nature par excellence. They are the forces which preside at the formation or regeneration of matter and its destruction. They are the types of life and death, ever fecundating and decomposing under the never-ceasing influx of the anima mundi, the universal, intellectual soul, the invisible but ever-present spirit which is behind the correlation of the blind forces. This spirit alone is immutable, and therefore the forces of the universe, cause and effect, are ever in perfect harmony with this one great immutable law. Spiritual life is the one primordial principle above. Physical life is the primordial principle below. But they are under their dual aspect. When the spirit is completely untrammeled from the fetters of correlation, and its essence has become so purified as to be reunited with its cause, it may, and yet who can tell whether it really will, have a glimpse of the eternal truth. Till then, let us not build ourselves idols in our own image, and accept the shadows for the eternal light. The greatest mistake of the age was to attempt a comparison of the relative merits of all the ancient religions, and scoff at the doctrines of the Kabbalah and other superstitions. But truth is stranger than fiction, and this world-old adage finds its application in the case in hand. The wisdom of the archaic ages, or the secret doctrine, embodied in the Oriental Kabbalah, of which, as we have said, the rabbinical is but an abridgment, did not die out with the Philalethians of the last eclectic school. The Gnosis lingers still on earth, and its votaries are many, albeit unknown. Such secret brotherhoods have been mentioned before Mackenzie's time by more than one great author. If they have been regarded as mere fictions of the novelist, that fact has only helped the brother adepts to keep their incognito more easily. We have personally known several of them who, to their great merriment, had the story of their lodges, the communities in which they lived, and the wondrous powers which they had exercised for many long years, laughed at and denied by unsuspecting skeptics to their very faces. Some of these brothers belonged to the small groups of travelers. Until the close of the happy Louis Philippian reign, they were pompously termed by the Parisian Gascon and trader as the nobles étrangers, and as innocently believed to be boyards, Wallachian gospodars, Indian nabobs, and Hungarian margraves, who had gathered at the capital of the civilized world to admire its monuments and partake of its dissipations. There are, however, some insane enough to connect the presence of certain of these mysterious guests in Paris with the great political events that subsequently took place. Such recall at least as very remarkable coincidences the breaking out of the Revolution of '93 and the earlier explosion of the South Sea bubble, soon after the appearance of noble foreigners who had convulsed all Paris for more or less longer periods by either their mystical doctrines or supernatural gifts. The Saint Germains and Caligostros of this century, having learned bitter lessons from the vilifications and persecutions of the past, pursue different tactics nowadays. But there are numbers of these mystic brotherhoods, which have naught to do with civilized countries, and it is in their unknown communities that are concealed the skeletons of the past. These adepts could, if they chose, lay claim to strange ancestry, and exhibit verifiable documents that would explain many a mysterious page in both sacred and profane history. Had the keys to the hieratic writings and the secret of Egyptian and Hindu symbolism not been known to the Christian fathers, they would not have allowed a single monument of old to stand unmutilated. And yet, if we are well informed, and we think we are, there was not one such in all Egypt, but the secret records of its hieroglyphics were carefully registered by the sacerdotal caste. The records still exist, though not extant, to the general public, though perhaps the monuments may have passed away forever out of human sight. Of 47 tombs of the kings near Gornor, recorded by the Egyptian priests on their sacred registers, only 17 were known to the public, according to Diodorus Siculus, who visited the place about 60 years B.C. Notwithstanding this historical evidence, we assert that the whole number exists to this day, and the royal tomb, discovered by Belzoni among the sandstone mountains of Biban el-Melek, is but a feeble specimen of the rest. We will add, furthermore, that the Arab Christians, the monks scattered around in their poor, desolate convents on the borderland of the great Libyan desert, know of the existence of such unbetrayed relics. But they are Copts, single remnants of the true Egyptian race, and the Copt predominating over the Christian monk in their natures. They keep silent. For what reason it is not for us to tell. There are some who believe that their monkish attire is but a blind, and that they have chosen these desolate homes among the arid deserts and surrounded by Mohammedan tribes for some ulterior purposes of their own. Be it as it may, they are held in great esteem by the Greek monks of Palestine, and there is a rumor current among the Christian pilgrims of Jerusalem, who throngs the Holy Sepulchre at every Easter, that the holy fire from heaven will never descend so miraculously as when these monks of the desert are present to draw it down by their prayers. The kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent take it by force. Many are the candidates at the doors of those who are supposed to know the path that leads to the secret brotherhoods. The great majority are refused admittance, and these turn away, interpreting the refusal as an evidence of the non-existence of any such secret society. Of the minority accepted, more than two-thirds fail upon trial. The seventh rule of the ancient Rosicrucian brotherhoods, which is universal among all true secret societies, the Rosicrucian becomes and is not made, is more than the generality of man can bear to have applied to them. But let no one suppose that of the candidates who fail, any will divulge to the world even the trifle they may have learned, as some Masons do. None know better than themselves how unlikely it is that a neophyte should ever talk of what it was imparted to him. Thus, these societies will go on and hear themselves denied without uttering a word until the day shall come for them to overthrow off their reserve and show how completely they are masters of the situation. And that is going to bring us to the end of Part 2, Chapter 8. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult series of topics. Not all that difficult, really. There was a lot of learning in this one. I know that I hold some unconventional beliefs, and I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something that I apologize for. The points that I pointed out here were things that I am fairly positive about, and therefore I wanted to point them out. But once again, do your own research, understand what they are talking about. I am not a member of any of these secret clubs. There is one secret club that I am, but apparently I'm the only member, right? As far as I know, I am the only one inducted. I do not have the ability to induct anyone, nor to give away any of the secrets. And there's not that many secrets. Most of it appears to be to give away information. So that is what I do. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, share, and a sub. Throw me a comment if you agree or disagree with anything that was said. If it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If you really like what I'm doing over here, hit me with that super thanks. And if there is another work that you would like to see me talk about in the manner that we are doing, drop that in the comments as well. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pit Steak. Peace.